Welcome to the Momentum Matters podcast, where we have courageous conversations with women leaders. You'll hear about their accomplishments, their experiences, challenges, and best advice. If you're inspired by women who have overcome barriers and gone on to do extraordinary things, you're in the right place. My name is Karen Taradas, and I'm the CEO of Social U, a digital marketing firm offering social media management, training, and consulting. Today on Momentum Matters, we're excited to introduce Dr. Julie McDonald, co-founder of McDonald Graham LLC, providing leadership development and coaching services. We'll hear about how psychology impacts physical health. Now here's our host, April Benetollo, CEO of Momentum Leaders, a Birmingham-based nonprofit on a mission to advance women in leadership.
Dr. Julie McDonald. Is it okay if I call you that?
Yes.
You're my friend Julie.
Call me Julie, yes.
Julie. I want to thank you for making the time to be with us today. I know it's been an incredibly hectic start.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled to be here. This is great. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's such an important topic. And as you know, for the month of January, we are focusing on issues related to health. We figured that with it being the start of a new year, there are many people that feel they've been through an incredibly difficult year.
I think that's all of us. Yeah, I think that might be all of us.
Maybe the most difficult year to date. So a lot of people have made resolutions. They're hopeful about new leadership, hopeful about a new future, and that 2021 will be certainly better than 2020.
Yes.
And so we want to focus on health.
Okay, great.
This month.
Great.
And as a clinical psychologist, we specifically wanted to focus with you on how our psychological state manifests itself in our physical bodies.
One of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So before we do that, I'd like to help our listeners get to know you better.
Okay.
And I would like to get to know you better.
Okay, great.
There are things about you I still don't know, as much as we have collaborated on things in the past. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about your upbringing.
Okay. So let's see. I'm the middle girl of three girls. My family's all in Kentucky. And I kind of grew up all over the place. So I was actually born in Alabama, but I've lived in Tennessee, Kentucky, Maryland. I lived in Ireland. We lived in Texas, Georgia. I lived in Seattle briefly as an adult. So we just moved around a lot because of my dad's job, and I was often the new kid in school. I was in 10 different schools in 12 years. So I was a super shy kid, and it was really, really hard to be the new kid in school. But in hindsight, I will say it forced me to learn how to speak up for myself and to make friends and to kind of break out of my shell. So in the end, it was a good thing. And now I feel like I can probably go anywhere in the world and be okay, which is a good thing to be able to do.
Right, yeah. Right. We moved around a lot too, but I think you definitely have me beat.
There was a bit of that going on, yeah.
Yeah, but I certainly can empathize with being the new kid in school.
Yeah.
Where did you find your inspiration growing up?
I was like kind of a quiet, nerdy kid. Like I loved to read. I loved when the bookmobile came to our neighborhood. I would beg my mom to take me to the library, and I'd come home with stacks of books, and I'd just read the same books over and over again. So like I think, being able to go anywhere and live any story was sort of what I sought out. And, one of the things that I've actually found in cleaning out my closet in 2020, as many of us have done, I found a book of quotes that I put together. Like I would just look for quotes that were inspirational to me, like from Helen Keller or other people. And that's where I got a lot of my inspiration, was just from people all over the spectrum of humanity.
Wow, yeah. So were you that kid that always won the readathons?
Maybe.
You got the camera for reading the most books?
Perhaps, yeah.
That was my sister.
Yeah.
I was like, can I use your camera? Because I only read one book.
I still love to read.
Yeah. And at what point did you decide to become a psychologist?
So, in college, I was actually a biology major. I thought I wanted to go to medical school, and I took a psychology of gender differences class as an elective, and it was fascinating, and I loved it, and I ended up doing a presentation on a panel. And that happened to be at the same time that I was taking organic chemistry, which I hated. And it dawned on me that maybe I should major in something that I really like and I'm good at, because I was not good at organic chemistry. So I changed my major actually my junior year in college, and I was very interested in the intersection of medicine and psychology. So I ended up pursuing my PhD in medical psychology. So it was a clinical program at UAB, but the focus was on medical psychology and the interaction between, how we think and how we feel and how we experience and how that affects our body.
Perfect.
Yeah.
For today.
Yeah. That's what I did for 25 years. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And so I'm wondering, did that class actually inform also the work that you are now doing with Lisa Graham?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are no accidents. It's like something about that just sparked a lot of interest for me, and kind of really sent me down a very different path. And I think what I realized in college was I love hearing people's stories. That's why I love to read and travel and listen to people and understand their stories. And people used to say to me, like, how can you sit in an office and listen to people complain about their lives? And I'm like, that's not what we're doing. I'm hearing people's stories and helping them understand how to change their story and make their story better. So anything that has to do with like understanding the pieces and parts of people's lives and how they all fit together is just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a few years ago, you started a collaboration with Lisa Graham.
I did.
McDonald Graham.
Yes.
And about a year ago, at the same time, you were in a clinical practice. And about a year ago, you made a courageous decision.
Yes.
To leave what I believe was a lucrative and
I
highly
loved
secure
my practice.
practice.
Yeah. So I was in practice with an amazing, wonderful group of people for 25 years. And I loved my practice, and I would probably still be in it if there were like 36 hours in a day, because I loved what I did. But it got to the point that the work that Lisa and I were doing with McDonald Graham was really starting to become more busy, and we were venturing off into different directions. And so I just had to make a decision, and I felt like, okay, like 25 years is a good long run in my clinical practice. It's time, for the sort of second career. And we'd been building it for about 4 years at that point, but I decided to make the leap.
Yeah.
About a year ago.
And so for those who are not yet familiar with what you do at McDonald Graham and the specific focus you have on gender, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure, yeah. So McDonald Graham is really a boutique leadership development coaching practice. And so we do a lot of individual coaching with men and women, but we work with a lot of female professionals, and we have a sort of a flagship leadership development program that we created called Transforming Success, and we've been delivering that for, I guess it's been 5 years. And then in 2020 we were forced to go virtual, so we created a virtual version of it, which we never would have done short of this COVID situation, but it's turned out to be a blessing, because now we can offer the program to people with no geographical or organizational barriers. So we're launching our first open enrollment in January. So we're excited about that. And then Lisa and I are both trained and certified by Brene Brown to deliver her Dare to Lead curriculum for courageous leadership skill set development. So.
Which I have taken and have enjoyed thoroughly. Yeah,
it's good stuff.
Very good stuff.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's a natural progression from having worked with a lot of professionals in my clinical practice. Really kind of what sparked me to make the change was Lisa and I want to get the same tools that we offer either in therapy or in coaching to more people earlier, so that they don't end up in a psychologist's office because they're burned out or depressed or having problems with anxiety or whatever, because we know these tools work in our day-to-day lives. And so, but a lot of people just haven't had, the chance to know about them or be taught how to use them.
Yeah. And it is a tool set.
It is, yeah. I mean, like, really, that's what Transforming Success is. It's a collection of tools that we put together in a way to help people develop self-awareness and develop self-management to create lives and careers that are satisfying and fulfilling and sustainable. Most of all, because that's what we see happen is, their career falters because they're not managing the things that they that are important to manage, be it decisions about their career or their physical health or their relationships or whatever it might be.
Right.
Yeah.
And I imagine as a psychologist, And as a person who trains professionally on how to do these things, that you're never stressed. Never
No.
stressed.
No, I was just sharing with April before we started. It's been a week. It's been a week of like nothing's going right, and I just can't seem to kind of get my rhythm. And I get stressed, particularly, last year when everything shut down. Lisa and I had just signed a 7-year lease on huge office space for our business. And within 3 months, we couldn't have anybody in the office. We couldn't do any of our workshops, and so it's been a pretty stressful year for sure.
Yeah, that kind of brings us to our topic for today of how does that sort of psychological state that we are in manifest itself in our physical bodies, both in terms of not just stress but also joy.
I mean, there's I could talk all day about this. There is just a plethora of fascinating research on the interaction between the way that we think and the way that we feel, the way that we talk to ourselves, the things that happen to us and how we interpret those, and how that shows up in our body. So, it can happen in short-term ways, like if I was just driving over here and somebody crossed the midline of the road, and I could feel, my body respond with adrenaline, because I'm like, I need to pay attention and make sure to pull over if this person's going to hit me. And so there's all sorts of things that happen short-term that protect us. The problem comes in when we are either stressing ourselves through the way that we talk to ourselves, and I'll talk about that in a minute, or if we're in a chronic state of stress in a situation that we don't have much control over, that we can't change. That begins to have some pretty profound effects on the way that our body functions. Even at the cellular level, there's fascinating research, actually Nobel Prize winning research that was started by two researchers, Elizabeth Blackburn and Alyssa Epel. And I'll just say, for readers who might be interested, they wrote a book called The Telomere Effect for the layperson. So it's not like a bunch of clinical jargon that you don't understand. They explain the process of what happens when we're in a chronic state of stress, what happens to our cells, what happens to our what are called the telomeres that are at the end of our cells that protect our cells when they divide. There's a whole cascade of events that happens, and when we are not able to manage our stress effectively, cellular deterioration happens, and then all sorts of things can get ignited from there, be it heart disease or cancer or autoimmune disorders that might be sort of sitting in your genes can get triggered. So there's some scary stuff that happens, and that's why we want to get this information to people so that they understand it's important to really manage our psychological and physical health, because it can get away from us if we don't do it on a regular basis.
Right.
And bad things can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And even short of those really, really bad outcomes, there are even just the daily
You're right. Right.
manifestations like headache, nausea,
Yeah.
racing heart.
Yeah, no, I learned this firsthand when I was in graduate school. My first year in graduate school, I had excruciating headaches every single day. And it was stress. I was very stressed. And I went to the student health, and they gave me some pain relievers that worked me out, and I couldn't think, and obviously that was not going to be a solution. And so
Not real good in college.
Right, yeah. This was actually in graduate school. And so I started doing relaxation, diaphragmatic breathing, things to kind of bring my stress level down and manage the headaches. And it worked, and so it was consistent with what I was learning, but I was experiencing it myself. And what I learned is whenever I have a headache, that's a pretty good sign I'm under a lot of stress. I need to pay attention to what's going on and kind of reel it back in. So for other people, it might be stomach upset. It might be heart fluttering. It might be dizziness. It might be, aches and pains, those kinds of things. And so I encourage people to pay attention to that. Your body's trying to tell you something. Don't, just do symptom control, symptom management, figure out what's going on in your life, figure out what you're saying to yourself in your mind that might be causing your body to react this way.
Right.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I believe when we were talking in a different conversation, some research that you've done on the vagal nerve. Do I have that correct?
Well, I have not done it, but I can tell you there's, again, there's lots of great research out there. Really, probably in the last, I would say 30 years, there's been a much better understanding of those connections, that happen between our brain and our body, and how those are mitigated by our psychological response. So for instance, we know that anxiety can, sort of travels that same pathway. And so the vagus nerve innervates a lot of our major organs. And so when we're having anxiety, we can feel it in our stomach, we can feel it in our heart, we can notice our breathing is changing. So there's a very significant and direct connection between our level of psychological distress or, positive psychological state and what happens in our body. And that's why, a lot of times we're better able to detect the physical symptoms than what we're feeling or what we're thinking. So that might be the place to start, and then we begin tracing it back.
Right.
What am I feeling? What am I thinking? What am I saying to myself that's making my body react this way?
Yeah, I know for myself, I was experiencing a lot of neck and shoulder pain, and really thought everything was coming from my shoulder. And after repeat visits with a chiropractor, it come to find out it's really coming from stress that is shortening the muscles in the front of my neck. And all kinds of downstream effects of, anxiety or racing heart or...
Yeah, it's real.
It's real.
And unfortunately, prior to probably the last 30 to 40 years, there was this split between mind and body. And there was this whole stigma around, if you have some sort of physical symptoms, it means you're crazy or you're making it up or whatever. No, we can't separate those things.
Right.
It's all in the same package. And so I'm encouraged that I think there's more available information just for regular people out there who are not reading scientific journals about what's really going on, and what you can do about it, how you can manage it early on.
I'm encouraged to see a lot more mainstream acceptance of things like meditation, massage.
Yeah, I get a massage every month. It's like the greatest part of my month.
Yeah.
Just to sort of let go of that stress, and it's real. We hold it in our body, we hold it in our muscles.
And as you said, it goes to the cellular level at that point.
Yeah, and that's what's fascinating to me is even if we've done some damage, we can reverse it by all of the same kinds of things that we were just talking about. Meditation, relaxation, making sure that we're experiencing positive emotions that come with being connected to friends or having fun, laughing, experiencing excitement, those sorts of things also have an effect and allow our body to function the way that it's supposed to.
Right.
Yeah.
So how would you recommend that people implement some of these things into their daily lives to get the maximum benefit? Because everybody wants to get the shortest way possible.
Well, it's interesting because in the telomere effect, they talk about they even try to create this enzyme telomerase in a pill form, so people can just take it, and have their cells heal. That doesn't work.
The true happy pill.
Right. It doesn't work. Our bodies are more complicated than that. What we know is that getting a good night's sleep every night, most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night, is absolutely crucial for our bodies to function the way that they're supposed to, for our brains to function the way that they're supposed to. Sleep is kind of like a garbage disposal, if you will. It helps us get rid of things that are not supposed to be in our brain and let the cells do what they're supposed to do. Exercise, healthy eating, fruits, vegetables, all the things your mom told you, and really being able to participate in activities that allow us to kind of be our authentic self, for lack of a better word, to do the things that are meaningful to us, to connect with people with whom we feel like we belong and can be ourselves, and can let down our guard and take off the armor and, just be. And did I mention exercise?
Yes.
Okay. Let me say that one again. It's
sleep, exercise.
Yeah. The
Diet.
basics. It's the basics that we know. They're not sexy. You can't get them in a pill form. There's no shortcut. But over the long term, when we engage in those things consistently, we feel better, we function better, our bodies are able to do the things that they're supposed to do.
And what do you see happens most often to derail people from that?
The biggest thing that I see is people feeling like they can sacrifice sleep. That is the biggest issue that I see. and exercise. Many of the professionals that I work with want to exercise. They know they need to get more sleep, but they're managing right now, they're managing kids at home, and they're managing working from home, and they're, trying to sort everything out, and they come last. And the things that are basic to them don't get taken care of.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is much of what Dr. Cannon talked about in her episode.
It's true. And what I would say is many, particularly women, will say, it feels selfish if I take an hour and exercise, or if I say to my family, I'm going to go to bed early. Here's what I say to them. The definition of selfish is putting your wants ahead of others' needs. The definition of self-care is putting your needs ahead of others' wants. Sleep,
very
exercise,
powerful.
Yeah. Alone time, those are needs. Those are things that we need. That's non-negotiable. And we have to find ways to get that. And we might need to talk with our families or our, teams or whatever, but everybody needs it. So it's not like any one person is unique. We all need the same things. We just have to figure out, how to make sure we get those consistently.
So say that one more time for us. Difference between self-care and selfish.
Yeah, so selfish is putting your wants ahead of someone else's needs. Self-care is putting your needs ahead of others' wants. Sometimes that's hard to define, but I would argue that sleep, exercise, healthy eating, alone time, some enjoyment in your day are basic human needs.
Mm-hmm. And how often do we ask ourselves as we're doing something, am I finding satisfaction or personal joy in doing this?
Right. Yeah. That's a big part of our Transforming Success program is like to really pay attention to those things and understand. We get so many messages about what success is supposed to look like. It's the bigger job, it's the bigger title, it's the bigger salary, the bigger house. And I cannot tell you how many people Lisa and I work with who have all of those things and they are miserable and you would never know it.
Yeah.
Because they don't tell people, because they feel bad, like I've got everything. Why am I not happy? Because we have to define success on our own terms. And it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
And so we like to give people like a permission slip to say like, you get to define this for yourself.
What about the question of happiness? You bring that up.
Yeah.
So Julie's philosophy on finding happiness.
So I've followed, for those of you who are interested in this whole field, I actually took one of the very first virtual courses with Martin Seligman, who was the father of positive psychology and who wrote the book Authentic Happiness probably maybe like 18 years ago, followed it up with a book called Flourish. But he and really a global network of researchers in psychology and other fields have been studying this whole issue of what is happiness and how do we define it. And it's morphed over the years into understanding like what are the components of well-being for humans. And they've identified at this point, 5 major components that include positive emotion, engagement, really being able to like sink ourselves into something that's fully engaging to us, positive relationships, a sense of meaning, and a sense of accomplishment. And in any one of those areas, there's tons of research about like what are the implications of this and what are the subtleties and nuances of it. But I'll give you an example. So positive emotion, we sort of take for granted, it's like, well, it feels good, it feels great to get a massage, or it feels great to hang out with your friends and laugh. But what we also know is that when we're in a state of positive emotion, we think differently. We think more creatively. We problem solve more effectively. We see past differences in, color, race, ethnic background, gender, whatever. We're able to see the bigger picture and solve more complex problems when we're in a state of positive emotion. And so if you take the burned out professional who's not getting enough sleep, who's not exercising, who's not, giving him or herself enough of what she needs, you don't see a picture of somebody who's able to do all those things.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's a huge connection between, taking care of ourselves and understanding how the way that we think and feel affects our body and vice versa, and good leadership. I mean, you cannot separate the two. That's why our, part of our philosophy is that we are human at work, and we need to understand how we function as humans when we're in the workplace. and certainly when we're in a leadership position, because that affects everyone around us.
And even at home, I mean,
Right.
you know, for
Right.
family situation,
Right.
if you're the parent, you are a leader of
Yeah, and you're
that
modeling.
family. And
You're modeling those behaviors, or not in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you share with us those boundaries that you set at home with your family? I just love these examples so much.
Let's see. So my kids are now in college, but when they were younger, one of the things that it occurred to me that I really like to come home and have my bed made. And I was always in a hurry, getting everybody ready and this and that. So one of their chores was they had to make my bed.
They made your bed
They made
in
my
the
bed
mornings.
every day. One would do the dishes, unload the dishes, one would make my bed. And what they discovered is it takes about 1 minute and 30 seconds to make mom's bed, so you really can't complain that you don't have time to do it. And so it made me happy, it made them happy, and they both make their beds on a regular basis now because they realize it just feels better to walk in to do that. The other thing that we did, and let me just say there were tears, there was wailing and gnashing of teeth, but we went on family walks on a regular basis and ate healthy foods, and they didn't like it, not one single bit, but now they're both, you know, they exercise, they eat well, not always, but they get it, you know.
Right.
So it really, a lot of it was modeling, and it's not always fun, it's not always easy, and they both are great sleepers. Even in college, they make sure that they get 8 hours of sleep every night.
And how did you make sure that you got your sleep?
I just shut it down. I was just like, I'm going to bed. Do not wake me up.
Even if your hair's on fire?
Well, if the house is on fire, you're bleeding, you wake me up. Otherwise, wake up your dad. That was how that worked.
Okay, nice.
Because I know for me, like, this is part of knowing yourself. If my kids would wake me up at night, I couldn't go back to sleep. And then the next day was terrible. And so I had to set that boundary. Like, and if it is not an emergency, or you just want a glass of water, or you want somebody to tuck you in, wake up dad, because my husband could go right back to sleep. And he was fine with it. So there's a lot of that negotiation that has to happen within a family to make sure that everybody's getting what it is that they need.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that you mentioned while we were talking is the impact that self-talk has on your psychological state.
Yes.
And so we all have these voices in our heads that are playing, I call them cassette tapes,
Yes.
but it's getting kind of outdated to say
right.
so. But play these
Playlists.
tracks,
Right, yeah.
you know, in our
Yeah.
minds, and whether or not they are positive or negative, as you were stating, research bears out that it flows through to even the cellular
Absolutely.
level.
Yeah. So whether we realize it or not, we are constantly talking to ourselves in our head about something and constantly interpreting the things that are happening to us. What we know is that there are some forms of self-talk that are much more detrimental than others. So self-talk that involves anxiety, worry, what's going to happen. And I define anxiety as a feeling that something bad is going to happen. It's not just I don't know what's going to happen. It's I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be bad. And so our bodies are gearing up to be prepared for whatever that threat is. And so if we're constantly worrying or having anxiety about what's going to happen next, it begins to affect us, you know, at that deeper level. The other big one is shame. And this is why I was so drawn to Brené Brown's work, because she's the premier researcher on shame. And, you know, when we are constantly telling ourselves that we're not good enough, we're not something enough, we're not thin enough, rich enough, smart enough, successful enough, organized enough, whatever it is, not enough, that affects us in very profound ways, psychologically certainly, but also at the physical level. And so we have to understand what we're saying to ourselves and how to correct that self-talk.
And how have you seen in your career that play out differently in men?
Yeah, I think it tracks pretty well with the research that Brené Brown has published or talked about in her books. When men are experiencing shame, oftentimes they discharge that negative emotion onto others, and they don't know what it is. They don't know the terminology. They don't know that that's the feeling that they're experiencing, but it's a very uncomfortable and very unpleasant feeling. So often they discharge it onto others. Women also may not have the language for it or understand what it is, but they tend to internalize it much more and kind of beat themselves up rather than dispersing it onto other people. both of those ways of dealing with shame have very negative effects. And it's important for leadership because that can happen whether you're a man or a woman. You can unintentionally discharge that negative emotion onto other people and create all sorts of problems that are just outside of your awareness. You don't realize that that's what you're doing. And so a lot of what we focus on is helping people develop that sense of awareness, of understanding how what's happening for them internally shows up in their language, their behavior, their demeanor. And that when you're a leader, other people pay attention to everything that you do.
Right.
And then they respond to it based on their own set of life experiences.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you leave us with as ways that we can learn more about the topic of psychology and physical?
Yeah. So actually this year, Lisa and I have launched in our newsletter what we think are the things that leadership needs to really look like in 2021. So we would invite anybody to, come to our website and get on our newsletter list. We also have a private Facebook group where we like to have good discussions about things that matter, that have to do with life and leadership. So we would invite you to follow us on Facebook. And
that's McDonald Graham.
McDonald Graham. And we have a Psychology at Work. That's the private group. And then we have an Instagram page and we're on LinkedIn. So what we really want to do is talk about the things that matter, because I think one of the ways that we overcome and manage some of this is to talk to each other about it. Don't keep it private.
Right.
Because everybody's dealing with the same things. And when we can have open conversations, a lot of what we see, particularly in the Transforming Success program, when those conversations get started, people are like, oh, thank God I'm not the only one.
Exactly.
And then the whole demeanor changes.
Yes.
And then you can have real, honest, genuine conversations.
People can be more vulnerable.
Yeah. And they can talk about and learn from and share with each other and walk out feeling so much better.
Yes.
Yeah.
We see the very same thing happen in our Upward class and our executive leadership program for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of times you feel like everybody else seems so happy, especially with social media where everybody's posting their best face forward.
Yeah.
And you don't really see the behind the scenes distress.
Right. Yeah. And so when, I'm talking to April and I find out, April's like struggling with problems in her shoulder and she's got stress. I'm like, oh girl, me too. We have a conversation about it,
Right.
But it's easy to look at other people and go, well, I can't talk to her. She's got it all together.
Right.
And she would think less of me if I share that I don't have it all together.
Exactly.
Yeah. But none of us has it all together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for the work you do, that you and Lisa do, and the thought leadership that you demonstrate in this community. And I'm so excited that you guys are doing your program virtually now, so that, like you said, the geographic barriers are removed. That's part of the reason why we launched this podcast and are doing the webcast and things that we're doing as well. So, COVID and the pandemic did bring
silver linings.
Some silver linings. Yeah. And as we start this new year, I wish you the best of success.
Thank you. You too. And I mean, we so appreciate what Momentum does in the world. And
well, we do well together, don't we? Yeah. Thanks.
All right, thanks.
The Momentum Matters podcast would not be possible without our sponsors. Please visit our website at momentumleaders.org/sponsors to learn more. Signing off, this is Karen Terradis from Social U.